All right, we have quorum, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, does anybody wish to have a consent item pulled? All right. What I'll take is a motion and seconder for the consent items and ask for any questions and comments. Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Palosa. And questions, comments? On the consent matters, Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to ask some questions regarding 2.1. Can you give me, through you, Chair, have staff give us an idea of timing of when Londoners can expect to start to see traffic flowing better because of this?
I'm sorry, are you looking for the?
I'm sorry.
I think you're talking about 2.10 because staff looks confused and I'm definitely confused.
Are we talking, I assume, Mr. Chair, we're looking at item 2.10?
My apologies, 2.10, yes, thank you.
You get a committee demerit point for that. Go ahead.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one confused. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. McGuire, and he can provide you an update on the schedule and our planned outlay.
Through the chair, implementation would start later this year, but full installation of the equipment would be towards the end of the third quarter of next year. Yeah, the Transportation Management Center, that's currently under renovation, and we would have it up and running early in the new year. So there's a number of different things happening at the same time. So we sort of anticipate having most of the work done by the end of the third quarter. So that would include having the CCTV cameras in order to monitor the traffic in real time and make adjustments in real time, the travel time as well. So those sorts of things would be finished.
Thank you. So if I'm understanding you correct, the third quarter of next year, this will be operational.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Just want to ask a question regarding what's the manual portion of the system in operation versus where the system would automatically adjust without any operator action?
And through the chair, the one component of the system is an adaptive traffic signal system, which self-adjusts in real time. Now, it requires considerable amount of hardware in the field in order for it to know traffic volumes and patterns in real time. So that it will be piloted, and that's towards the end of next year for that. The more manual would be using the CCTV and the Bluetooth or the travel time sensors and that in order to monitor and make adjustments. So say there's a collisions, or a lane is blocked due to either planned or unplanned construction, they would be able to make those adjustments. And also to notify the public if there are changes, that there is a lane blocked or a collision.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Is my understanding correct that we did have some form of traffic management control in the city?
Through Chair, if I understand, do we currently have a system? If I understand correctly, yes, we do have a traffic signal system. It's based on, our timings are based on counts, so we do at least every 3 years. And the signals are synchronized based on those counts, but they do not adjust based on changing in traffic patterns. Also, we don't currently have the CCTV, so monitoring them remotely is not possible. As an example, we like to use is the flood of the recent flood there. Our eyes in the field was staff going out and monitoring traffic and feeding back to City Hall so we could make those adjustments. Those sorts of things we want to be able to do remotely and get a much wider part of the city covered rather than a few staff reporting back on where the traffic problems because of that flooding, those types of things. But we do have a traffic signal system. It's coming up on 15 or so odd years old. I've lost track now, so it has the newer technology that's available now will help us improve the traffic flow. But it's not that our current system, was very good for its time, but it has outlived its life.
Thank you, Chair.
Further questions, comments? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. I certainly, first of all, I'm excited to see this happening. And I know that this is really laying the sort of backbone for the TIMS proposal that we submitted as part of the transit improvement projects that came out of the former BRT plan. This particular component, of course, does not represent the entire budget case that was presented to us in regard to the TIMS system as a whole. But I was wondering if you could give me a sense of what percentage of the overall TIMS project this represents, like what other improvements do we need to make once these are put in place to meet the transit improvement project goals?
Just for clarification, just because you're using an acronym, can someone say what TIMS is? Just to help. For people who may be, the 3 or 4 people who may be watching at home.
TIMS is the Transportation Intelligent Mobility Management System.
So yes, TIMS is the broader project. This is one component of it. It's a project that's rolling out through a bunch of different procurements. So this ATMS, the Advanced Transportation Management System, is sort of the brains behind this system that will enable all the other capabilities, transit priority being a primary one. So tonight's award is the ATMS brains and a controller at all 403 traffic signals. Other components of the project are the Transportation Management Center that Mr. McGuire mentioned, traffic video monitoring systems, enhanced travel time sensors, so a lot of field hardware, and in particular on the to operate that initial adaptive signal pilot, a lot of hardware associated with that, and all these additional capabilities will help us roll information out to Londoners better, both with better signal improvements and also through information sharing with portals like the Waze app. So as far as the overall project, maybe I'll defer to Mr. McGuire, but this probably represents a third of the overall TIMS project.
Through the chair, the overall TIMS project is $28 million. So we had not quite 10% there. My math is not working for me tonight. I'm still deck building mode.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, that's absolutely fine, Mr. McGuire. I wasn't so much concerned about the math in terms of the financing, just in terms of the overall project build, and I'm satisfied with, you know, approximately a third of the actual hard infrastructure this kind of represents. In fact, I'm still counting, like I'm still trying to look at seat counts from last night, so my math is not great this morning either. It was a rather late night. I assume I know the answer to this is going to be yes, but just moving forward, because the report did indicate, you know, we do install new traffic signal systems every year as the city grows. I assume that moving forward, any plans for new installations will include traffic signals that are compatible with this program moving forward, so we won't have to go back and retrofit controllers later.
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
I have a really good comment about seat counts to make at you, but I think it would be completely out of order, so I'm not going to do it. Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also tired from last night. It is kind of like a political Christmas of who's getting what. So thank you everyone for being here at work today. And I have several questions across several different items. I'll just go through them in numerical order. In regards to 2.2, just a comment of thank you for working with me on the White Oak Road speed reduction, especially since LTC recently expanded service into this industrial area. We have the road meeting little bus stops, and I do see people walking on the road, so knowing it's a slightly lower speed limit before our infrastructure is put in to assist with that is greatly appreciated from my residents. In regards to item 2.5 in the London Hydro water meters, glad to see that the smarter meters will detect potential backflow issues. Serving on the water board, we know when things go the wrong way and potential hazards for contamination. It's great that we're putting in precautions. Wondering if, having done the tour at London Hydro, wondering if there's plans to roll out and the smart meters that can see if you didn't turn off your master water shutoff when you were gone and a leak happens in your house, that they can see a big dramatic increase of water just running constantly, if that's part of this meter program or if we see that coming down the line.
Through the chair, we are rolling out what we're calling the interval water metering. And what that allows you to do is to actually see on a real-time basis the amount of water that you're using. So at this point, it's really a reactive opportunity to be able to take a look at see what the at what time of days you're experiencing large amounts of water usage. But the thought is that eventually you might be able to have more of a reactive to say, okay, there's been a large amount of use in a very short amount of time, and then be able to have that circle back with the resident on it. So that's where we'd like to get to, but we're started that first piece of it, and it is a really exciting thing, and it's really something that's beyond what other cities are doing. So it's a great thing to have in the SLA.
Thank you for that, because I was certainly really excited to hear that as well during the tour and hoped we were going in that direction, which it sounds like we are. So thank you for that. In regards to 2.10, having looked at the report and the bicycle detection sensors, are these sensors going to be accurate enough that we don't need what people refer to as the bag buttons when that traffic measures are put in? Is that going to be adequate, that the cyclists will have the same opportunities as a car when they hit the intersection, that it will detect their bike and they don't need to actually push the button?
Through the chair, currently the old standard for vehicle detection was induction loops, very economical, but they do rely on a metal content. As bicycles became less iron content in them, they became much more difficult for loops to detect them. They still do detect. The corners of those induction loops are the most sensitive. So those, in the meantime, while we are upgrading to these radar detectors, that's still the best place to be detected. But no, the radar that we are now using on new builds and reconstructions is a much better technology for detecting all modes of transportation coming along the road, whether it be motorcycles, large trucks, cars, cyclists.
Thank you. And another question through our chair. In regards to item 2.9 and the city's energy consumption, it seems that we're increasing it. Just looking if the staff could speak to that in general about what we're going to be doing for energy conservation since we have declared a climate emergency, of our next steps on that. And then my final question, just to give you a heads up, is just going to be an item to 2.12 in regards to the landfill expansion of the cell being as in Ward 12. I know we're looking at doing a little bit more consultation with our Indigenous neighbors in regards to some groundwater concerns, which I'm really excited to hear that we're following that path. Just making sure we're still on path and on track for that project to keep our completion dates and project dates as we go.
Through the chair, regarding report 2.9, the community energy use and greenhouse gas emission inventory. What you're seeing in that report is a collection of information that covers a number of years. With respect to 2018, what you see is a year that was one of those anomaly years where we had a very cold winter and a very warm summer. As a result, energy use went up. We call that a spike year. We've had a couple of those in the past. But if you look at our downward trend, we're still going in the right direction. Those spike years will always occur. What we have also introduced, though, is a way to sort of smoothen out a spike year by looking at a rolling average. And if you see our rolling average, we're moving in the right direction. We're at a 13% reduction compared to 1990, which is the current measurement year for this for council. So we're in the right direction. 15% is to be achieved by 2020. We believe with the programs in place that we'll be able to achieve that. What the report begins to highlight is there's much, much more work to do to achieve the next target or even any change target in this community. And in fact, under the community or energy action plan, what you see in our report is some wording that highlights very clearly that it's going to be part of a larger project. That larger project is going to be actions that specifically address the climate emergency declaration. That work is going to be coming back very soon, within a month's time. But what you see here are two reports that really capture what has occurred until this point in time. View it as, if you may, foundation material. It clearly shows that investment to dates have been working. They've been working at the provincial level and they've been working at the federal level. We have activities that have occurred here in London which show really good progress. What is clear, though, is that the next steps are crucial. There's much work to dive into, much work that has to occur. A lot of the low-hanging fruit we've grabbed. We've seen tremendous interest from a number of businesses in London, a number of community groups, a number of individuals. To be honest, that's not good enough. We're going to have to go much deeper into the work. It's going to have to come with leadership from council, leadership from city staff, and leaders in the community, both within community organizations and business organizations. All that type of information is going to be captured in our next report, so view these as a good base to work from. We've been tracking for many years, and that's important because therefore we know where our efforts should go, and our report highlights that things such as the transportation system, things such as home energy efficiency are key for actions, as well as items such as food waste avoidance. Very important there to understand that not only is a waste of material, food, but also the greenhouse gas that is generated during the creation of food and the transportation of food. I'm here to answer any questions on that, or can take.
Any further questions or comments? Now, you got Mr. Stanford started. Are you going to keep this going?
I enjoy my conversations here and outside of here with Jay. We do spend a lot of time together. Just looking for the quick follow-up of item 2.12 to make sure that landfill, all the project dates are still on track, even with a little bit more consultation and work that needs to be done.
Through the chair, everything's on track, and it's really no surprise that the Indigenous communities want more involvement. We were prepared for that. We're actually quite pleased that the interest is as far away as Sarnia, and we're also very pleased that they're quite prepared as First Nations to collaborate together to make our activities actually easier to share our information. We get to do it 1 or 2 times across about 8 different First Nation communities. So we're quite pleased with what has occurred. We've had some good help internally here from staff that are very good in working with Indigenous communities, and we found a really good way to share our information in a very good collaborative effort.
We have a mover and seconder then for the consent items. We'll call anything further? No? Call the vote. I think we've already had mover and seconder. Yeah. Voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Moving on to the next item, which is the 9th report of the Cycling Advisory Committee. In reviewing it, there's a number of requests to staff, which staff can follow up on. I think we need something further, I understand, on the request that the London Police Services Board send a member to the next committee meeting. I'm not sure that's a matter we have control of. It's an outside body, so I think we have a motion prepared to deal with that issue also. Are there any questions, first of all, or comments on the report? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. And I just have to say that when we get a report like this, I think it's important to keep in mind that our advisory committees are there to advise. I was actually surprised to see this in items for direction as opposed to consent items. I'm happy to receive their advice, but when it comes to setting direction, that should come from this committee and through this committee to council. And it's particularly, frankly, frustrating to have an advisory committee asking us to direct an outside board or commission to send representatives to one of their meetings. So I really just want to, share with committee members, I'm a little frustrated that they simply didn't just, as a committee, send a request to the Police Services Board to have somebody attend. I don't think that this is something that needs to come from direction through us. It makes me really uncomfortable when our advisory committees are taking this approach to things.
Noted. I understand your sentiments. My understanding is that they cannot make that request directly, and they have to go through us to request an outside board. Whether it happens or not is up to that board, but we've drafted a motion to deal with that particular issue. And it's coming up now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Next matter is under deferred matters, additional business is the deferred matters list. Is there anything on that? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just one thing on the deferred matters list, and that is the last item on the list with regard to parking changes that may come forward to us for consideration. Through you, I'd like to ask staff if it would be possible to commit to a date, in particular for Part A, which is the overnight parking ban program, potential amending for November 1st until April 30th. If possible, I'd really like to see us lift this ban for April 30th, 2020. So I wonder, through you to staff, if we could have a report back on this maybe by the end of Q1 of 2020, and that would still, I think, give us enough time to lift the ban early, potentially next year, if council decides to take that direction.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will work with our colleagues in Development and Compliance Services to make sure that we give council that opportunity to make the change for the 2020 end of the parking ban season. So you're correct, we'd need to come back sometime in Q1 to allow the bylaw to go through the regular process.
On that matter? Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Lewis, and we'll vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
And somebody who is watching us has confirmed there's 8 people watching the meeting. So I underestimated, and I apologize for that. The last matter is the 10th report of the Cycling Advisory Committee. I actually had a chance to meet some members of the committee about this. There's a large document, which is a complete revision, if I could put it that way, of our cycling master plan that has implications across, Ms. Scheer can address this, but I think it has applications for changes all across our work. And staff has asked for the opportunity, since they just saw it, I think they just saw it on Monday when we were meeting, pre-meeting, they have an opportunity to look at it before we just send it on to council. So I prepared a motion to deal with that. I think Councillor Lewis's comments earlier are somewhat apt. It is unusual for an advisory committee to try to do or rather than making recommendations, to do a total revamp of the work of the municipal council. So I won't say anything more, but I'll see if committee would like to do it in that manner. And Ms. Scheer, I don't know if you have any comments, but that's what you had conveyed to me.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. There are far-reaching implications of the changes that would be proposed here, budgetary as well as impacts on other projects and how we move about our city. We would not be in a position at this point to provide meaningful advice to council should there be questions at council on the content of this material.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I actually attended this meeting just in the back, and I did have a couple questions. I guess I did leave before it was over and concerned about the length of some of these meetings. This one just surpassed 3 hours. It's longer than we actually sit as a council standing committee, and knowing that there's a lot of staff that's at those meetings too, I'm raising that concern that if you're there, you can't be implementing what that committee brought forward and that we directed to go on for. So I'll leave that just as a public note then of seeing that concerned. Also concerned about item 3.2 in this of the committee, the advisory committee asking civic administration to go back and look at the 30 kilometers an hour. Certainly I supported the 30 kilometers per hour, just concerned that is this loop of council makes a decision and then a committee says, go back and look at it, and back and forth. Hoping that the committee would be aware of when staff brings forward the 30 kilometers in school zones that we're still looking at, that we can actually get their feedback of how they feel about that and be proactive that way, respecting that there's great minds at the table and wanting to use the knowledge as we keep making questions to get decisions together. And my last question is specifically through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Stanford. I saw the kit spoken to in item 5.2, and it's the request for budget allotments for these bicycle safety light kits. Could you just tell me, like, I saw the kit, and just, I guess, speak to the rest of council or this committee to know, they know what those kits are and the price point for each kit, should any of us on council see a need for one that we might want to use at a community safety meeting or something that we want to host ourselves.
Through the chair, a group called Share the Road does a purchase on behalf of municipalities across Ontario, and they're able to get a package of 2 lights, one for the front of your bike and one for the rear of your bike, at a very reasonable price. I think it's in around $3.50, where normally it'd be somewhere at a price point between $11 and $12. So in this case, the advisory committee wanted to spend some of its money to purchase these to use as part of its outreach program, something that staff are very supportive of and within their mandate. We've actually purchased some of these in the past and found them quite valuable too. It's obviously something very valuable for people to have on their bikes and a requirement, but it also just starts that conversation too with some people who just don't have them. So we view this as a good thing for going forward and a good use of advisory committee money.
The motion does, I should have mentioned this, the motion includes approval of those budget items for the committee, just so you're aware. I should have mentioned that, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that clarification. And a follow-up on that to staff. If councillors wanted to acquire some of the kits, if we were doing stuff within our wards, is there a way for us to get that price point or pre-purchase with your order, or are we just to be left to our own devices?
Through the chair, I think you could actually purchase along with us, as long as we receive 2 separate invoices. I think that'd be very appropriate. That way you could have take advantage of the deal as well. So it's something that we plan on taking action on before the end of the year, because I understand that there's a supply that is available. So we'd be happy to assist you in getting a supply.
Anything further? Councillor Lehman?
Yeah, you know, I'm a little concerned. I share Councillor Lewis's concerns here. This is a huge planning issue. It touches things from spaces of methadone clinics, dictating road widening, mandatory parking spots. I'm not too sure if, if this goes to staff, this would be a considerable effort to cost all these things out. Is this the appropriate committee to be looking at such a major document, or should it go through planning? Is it through strategic planning? I'm not too sure if I want to see staff committing at this particular time with the budget coming up and the issues that we're facing there, their efforts in diving into this. So
I'll let Ms. Scher comment on that. She's obviously head of engineering. Is that your, whatever the title is, you own it, so I'll let you answer it.
Head of Engineering, City Engineer, it's all good, Mr. Chair. I'll leave it to the clerks to decide what committee this ought to go to, because I don't always get that correct. There is an immense amount of work to do all of the actions that are referred to in here. Because they are referred to as requests, we would address them as our programs and resources permit, versus dedicating specialized resources to review and report back on all of these contents. But certainly, if council does not wish to see us pursue what is the content of this plan further, that is a direction that staff would take from committee and council.
I would like to move that we receive this report with no further action.
The way the motion is drafted, it just says, be referred to the Civic Administration for consideration and action as appropriate, which leaves it, I understand what you're saying, it leaves it in the hands of administration, and I don't want to, it doesn't tie the hands of administration to come back and say, we've done a comprehensive analysis of this. they have to have that opportunity because it does touch so many areas. And it may be areas that they don't go into. So I don't know, that motion, I think covers it, but I'll leave it with you.
I'm fine with that. My concern is that other advisory committees will start to see this as a way to perhaps get into, the London plan and doing things that council should be doing. So I take it with a grain of salt, and as long as there's enough leeway there for staff to make appropriate priorities, I'm okay with that.
Ms. Chair agrees with that. Yes, there is an issue of governance, and I know that it's something we discussed. There has been training for all advisory committees in terms of what their responsibilities are. Beyond that, I share many of the concerns that I've heard today from committee. So I'm not the one who's suggesting this is an appropriate approach. In fact, I think the concerns of the committee are well-founded, but I think we have a motion to cover that. Put it up on the screen, then someone can decide to move in a second. In the meantime, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just, and particularly I appreciate Councillor Ploz's question through you to staff about the safety lights, and I think that that's a perfectly reasonable request. I also share Councillor Lehman's concerns about the tremendous amount of in fact, almost every area of operation of the city would be impacted by this report. If we were dedicating special resources to it, I would have a real problem with it because we ask so much of our staff already, and there are already so many ongoing projects that they're working on. Hearing from Ms. Scheer that will, in fact, look at these things as our programs roll out and work continues, I'm much more comfortable with this motion now, understanding that staff will consider where appropriate. So, but I wouldn't want to hold up the approval of the expenditure of those funds for the committee, because I do think that that kind of outreach is a valuable tool, and I think that that's actually the kind of work that I see value in our advisory committees for. So I wouldn't want to hold that up. So I can support this motion.
We did craft the motion so it would address these concerns, anticipating that the committee would have some concerns. Prepared to move this and second it? Oh, you don't see it yet? Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Oh. Moved by Councillor Ploza. We have a seconder, Councillor Lehman. Anything further? Call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
And before we adjourn, I just want to welcome Mr. Turner to his clerking role. He's been at meetings, very conscientious, and it's really great to have him here covering this, and I'll try not to offend him in my remaining time as chair. I just need a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Lewis. All in favor, we'll do a hand vote. We're adjourned.